Have you ever felt lost amid a project? People are doing some tasks, but you don't really understand what they are working towards. A project like that usually lacks the work breakdown structure. But here's a catch. How to create a WBS for a real-world IT project? Obviously, theoretical knowledge won't be enough. Hello, I'm Dmitry Nizhbetsky, and I know firsthand there is a huge gap between the project management theory and practice. And I believe the best way for you to become a great project manager is to tap into someone else's experience. So let me share some practical tips about work breakdown structure which come from 12 years of my experience leading IT projects. These actionable insights will empower you to create a WBS for your real-world project. First of all, what is a work breakdown structure? In simple terms, it's a tool that helps you visualize and identify all pieces of work on your project. A work breakdown structure is like an instruction manual for IKEA furniture, but in reverse order. On the last page, you have a fully finished product. Then you start to disassemble it into carcass, shelves, and doors. But you don't stop here, and you disassemble those into smaller building blocks. And as a result, you discover what building blocks, materials, and all the small pieces you need to create the desired product or service. WBS works the same way. We take our vision of the final product and break it down into deliverables. Then we break down deliverables into work packages. A deliverable is a product, service, or result that is produced as a part of a project and that is required to complete the project successfully. In other words, a deliverable is anything created or accomplished as a part of the project. But in practice, think about deliverables as something testable and something you can show or hand off to your stakeholders. Deliverables can be tangible or intangible, internal or external to the project, interim or final. There are many different types of deliverables, and this leads us to the main question. When is it cost efficient to create a work breakdown structure on your project? For example, if you run a software development project and you need to create only a mobile app, a WBS is overkill. That's because you'll have a lot of interim deliverables at the same time, like different versions of your app or builds, and the final build will be your main deliverable. On the other hand, I do recommend creating a WBS when you need to develop, for example, a mobile and web versions of the application, because it's usually even more complicated in the real world. That's because you may need to create interim versions of the product for events like exhibitions, trade shows, or demonstrations for shareholders. You may also need to provide project management documentation for stakeholders' approval. All of that are deliverables, and unfortunately, you can't simply take them from the development process and hand them off to important stakeholders. Usually it takes extra effort to make them presentable. And obviously, if you develop an enterprise-level web application, your project will have front-end, back-end, database, external components and integrations with different services. So in this case, you must create a WBS. Now, the main question is how to identify all these deliverables. So pay close attention here, because books won't tell you this. You put the vision of the final product, service, or result at the top of a work breakdown structure. And it should come from a project charter or a conversation with project owners. The second and usually the third level of a WBS includes all main deliverables. These come from multiple sources. First, if you follow a structured project management process, you analyze the project charter and project scope statement. These documents must describe the main deliverables. By the way, if you need templates and examples of all these documents, I'll leave you a link below this video. Second, you must review internal policies and workflows. They will indicate which project management documentation and processes are mandatory. Third, you communicate with project stakeholders, specifically subject matter experts. They will have requirements for product architecture, design, features, and capabilities, which may become a separate deliverable. For example, many quality requirements come from internal and external stakeholders, such as performance, business validation, or cybersecurity testing, which require formal reports and sign-offs. Fourth, you must analyze a typical project lifecycle. For example, the software development lifecycle describes a lot of typical deliverables, and you must decide whether to make one of them for your project. For instance, UI designs, technical architecture documentation, and regression testing reports are examples of deliverables that SDLC recommends as the best practices. Fifth, consider what project management artifacts you must create and make presentable to a larger audience, or artifacts that stakeholders must approve. In the same group as we have already discussed, ask about interim versions of the product or service you must produce for special events. Last but not least, consider what it takes to put together all the other pieces of the product and make them available to the public. For example, what does it take to build this whole service in the production environment? Such sub-deliverables go into a unique project management or integration deliverable in the work breakdown structure. Last but not least, do the wildcard brainstorming. Work with the team, subject matter experts, stakeholders, and other project managers to identify different pieces of the project that may require time and effort to produce. By the way, if you find this video useful, please click the like button right now. This way I'll know you want more videos like this one. Thank you in advance. This is your second and third levels of project decomposition, but you shouldn't stop here because these pieces are usually too big to manage efficiently. You must continue breaking them down into smaller deliverables and work packages. But at this level, the focus shifts to working closely with project team and technical subject matter experts. However, it's critical to remember that no one should expect a project manager to create a work breakdown structure alone. Instead, a PM's role is to facilitate the collaboration of all the available experts. And next, we encounter a significant challenge that even experienced project managers may find daunting. Because identifying deliverables is one thing, but correctly incorporating them into a WBS is a complex task that requires careful consideration. So if you are multitasking, get your attention here. I'm going to explain the main rules of creating a correct WBS. First, you should use nouns and adjectives to describe all elements in the WBS. Nothing in the work breakdown structure should sound like a process or activity. Everything should be the final state of that piece of work. Second, the sum of child elements should constitute the fully finished parent item. You should not assume there is some work outside of the WBS to put things together. Also, IT project managers often omit testing and bug fixing from the scope of work, so it's flying somewhere outside of the scope management. But keep in mind that WBS describes only the project's main elements and assumes that you create them of the required quality. And again, there are no processes here. Moreover, WBS shows only child-parent connections. It doesn't show any dependencies or sequence order of work like in a Gantt chart. Third rule: a WBS should include all internal, external, interim, and project management deliverables. And the worst thing you can do is create a WBS for customers that only shows the external deliverables. Fourth, a work breakdown structure is not a one-time effort at the start of the project. It's a living document you must maintain and update constantly. Now you might think, great, I understand a work breakdown structure now, but let me warn you. When it comes to practice, you'll need a lot of input information to create a WBS. It's critical to understand where this information comes from, otherwise you'll miss some deliverables, leading to delays and unhappy stakeholders. So watch this video next. It will help you understand how to build the whole scope management process from start to finish. As a result, you'll be one step closer to becoming a great project manager.